David Rand is with us now. Dr. Rand is assistant professor of psychology, economics, and management at Yale University. He is also director of Yale's Human Cooperation Laboratory. Dr. Rand, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. And David, this caught my eye on the web a little while ago, is that you and your colleagues have done a study about why ordinary people do extraordinary things when someone else's life is on the line. Describe what you found out in this intuitive impulse to act.
So a lot of my research tries to understand this question of why people are willing to pay costs to help others, whether those costs are material costs, like, donating to charities or things like that, or like more high-risk things like, risking personal injury to try and save another person. And what a lot of our research suggests across a bunch of different domains is that in many cases, people's first response is to want to help and to do the right thing. And then when they stop and think about it, the sort of calculus of self-interest or of worry and concern overwhelms that cooperative impulse. Mm-hmm. And so it's a view of human nature that has our sort of gut reactions looking good and has our sort of conscious rational selves not looking so hot.
So what you found is that, again, this intuitive impulse to act and help, it overrides the self-preservation instinct.
Well, yeah, the way that I think about it is what our intuitions are, or where our intuitions come from,
right,
is I don't think of them as being like genetically hard-coded, but instead they're kind of habits. There are sort of rules of thumb for what are typically a good idea. And so in the context of our social lives, most of the time it's a good idea to be a cooperative, helpful person, because most of the time you're interacting with your friends, your family, your coworkers, these people that you have long-run relationships with. And so if you're a jerk to someone today, then that's going to come back to you in the future. Or if you're helpful to someone today, that will come back to you in the future. And so we get in the habit of being generally cooperative and generally wanting to help others. And then when we find ourselves in atypical situations, either one of these extreme altruist type scenarios, or situations where it's a total stranger that's never going to sort of come back to benefit you from helping them, your first impulse is to treat it like normal daily life where it's a good idea to help. And then when you stop and think about it, you realize, oh, no, wait, something different is going on.
Right. Dr. Rand, describe how your study proceeded and give us an example of some of these heroes. And I understand you used, this was a study of 50 or so civilian heroes, and I had no idea there was a Carnegie Hero Medal. I went to carnegiehero.org and found out that he had established this in 1904. I had no idea there was a Carnegie Hero Fund. Describe what you did in interviewing these people and what you found.
Totally. So I should say that most of the experiments, like most of what I do is in the laboratory where we give people, small amounts of money and they make choices about whether to keep it for themselves or to donate it to others. And then we either force them to decide quickly or make them stop and carefully think about it. And those experiments are great because they're very carefully controlled and we can really tell what's going on.
Right.
But in this particular paper, we wanted to look at real world extreme altruists. And so we took this list from the Carnegie Hero Foundation, and we searched in newspapers for all of the interviews, any published interviews in newspapers or radio or TV with any of these altruists. And so we found 51 of them who would risk their lives to save strangers. So like there was one woman who was a 21-year-old college student, during a flash flood, jumped into the water and pulled a 69-year-old drowning man trapped in a car to safety. Or another guy who was at a 70-year-old climbed into a burning vehicle to rescue a 48-year-old woman trapped inside after a car accident. These sorts of things. And we took all of the interviews that they gave and we extracted the parts of the interviews where they described why they did it.
Right.
and then we took these excerpts and we recruited a bunch of experimental participants to read them and rate them for how kind of fast, intuitive, just going with your gut they were versus sort of rational or deliberative.
Right.
And the two different scenarios that you could think of is one could be people were like, oh, it just felt like the right thing to do, I did it. Or the other thing could be like, I was scared, but I knew it was the right thing to do, and so I made myself do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would call the first of those as a sort of intuitive response, and the latter as a more deliberative response. The question was it the first impulse to help, or was the first impulse to save yourself, but then you had to override that in order to get yourself to do the right thing? And what we found overwhelmingly, the statements were rated as being maximally intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, I just did hear one quote from the woman the 21-year-old that rescued the guy in the flash flood. She said, "I'm thankful I was able to act and not think about it."
Right.
Or like the guy that climbed, that rescued the woman from the burning car said, "I just did. I felt like I needed to do. You don't think about things at that time. You just do it."
Dr. Go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to reset for our listeners. Dr. David Rand with us, Assistant Professor of Psychology, Economics, and Management at Yale University, Director of Yale's Human Cooperation Laboratory. Go ahead.
So these heroes, these people that risk their lives to save strangers, overwhelmingly describe their decision processes as being automatic and intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And we just for to be a little bit rigorous about it, we compared the subjects, these people that we recruited to read these interviews. We compared their ratings with people rating other texts that we generated describing intuitive decision-making or deliberative decision-making, and the heroes' descriptions look very much like the intuitive statement and not at all like the deliberative statement.
Now, as I understand it, David, that what you found out and what you're describing that came out of this study of these 51 civilian heroes was consistent with your previous studies, and you touched on it here, these kind of economic games that you have in the laboratory, whereas if someone thinks about something, they tend to be more selfish. Where there is an intuitive response, they tend to be more cooperative. Is that right?
Right, exactly. So with the Carnegie Heroes, what's cool about it is that they're real-life people actually doing things, really risking their lives. But the problem is there's lots of stuff that's not controlled. Mm-hmm. We're just sort of relying on their self-reported decision processes. It could be that people don't like to sound like they were scared, and so everyone just says, "Oh, I immediately did it." And so that's why it's important that we complement the Carnegie Hero interviews with these laboratory experiments. And so the way they typically work is we either bring people into the lab or recruit them online. We run a lot of stuff because we don't want to only use college students. We run a lot of subjects or a lot of studies online where we recruit people from all over the country and sometimes all over the world. And then we put them to. We say, okay, you're going to play this game with 3 other people. You each get, say, $10, and then you choose how much of this money to keep for yourself and how much to contribute it sort of for the good of the group, where then all of the contributions will get doubled and split equally among everyone in the group. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's like if everyone contributes their money, everyone will double their money, which is good, but you will make even more money if you keep your money while the other people contribute theirs. So you can sort of free ride off the contributions of others. Right. So what we find is,
So you don't find that Republicans are the selfish ones and Democrats are the compassionate ones?
No, so there are not that consistent differences based on ideology.
Doggone it!
But actually, I think it's a super important point. Actually, which is totally tangent from everything else that we're talking about. But I think that an important aspect of these games is it's very clear what is the thing that's best for the group and what is the thing that's best for the individual. Mm-hmm. And because we want to try and get rid of these ideological differences. Where I feel like when you think about Democrats versus Republicans, I think most people want to do the right thing, want to do the thing that's good for the country. It's that there's disagreements about what actually is good for the country.
Right.
And in these games, we try and take that out by making it very clear what's individually beneficial, what's collectively beneficial.
Right.
And what you see is that if we either put people under time pressure, so we say, please decide as quickly as possible, you have to make your decision within 10 seconds, or if other people we have before they make their decision, we have them write about a time in their life where they used they went with their gut and it worked out well. And you see that those people contribute more to help the group than people that we tell to either carefully consider their decision before they choose, or people that we have write about a time that they carefully reasoned through something and it worked out well before.
Right. Now, David, do you find what does the study show? The study of this subject show, if at all, why we make these decisions impulsively to act? Are we hardwired? Is this part of an evolutionary process? What are the suppositions here, and what has research shown?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think that a lot of people, as soon as they hear this sort of intuitive thing, they think about hard-coded by evolution. But we've run a bunch of experiments that suggest that that's not what this is about. It's not about something hard-coded, but rather it's about something learned. Like I was saying before, it's about a kind of habit that's developed. And so you can see that in a few different ways. One way is that, so if the idea is your intuitions your intuitions code for behaviors that worked well most of the time.
Right.
Then if you live in a community where you feel like most people are trustworthy, you can cooperate with people. If you help them, they'll help you, and so on. Then you should get cooperation reinforced as a default. But if you come from a community where you feel that other people typically are untrustworthy, then you shouldn't. And so we find that in these experiments. We find that people that report their daily life interaction partners being trustworthy, they're intuitively cooperative, and then when they stop and think about it, they get selfish.
Right.
Whereas people that don't trust those in their daily life, their intuition is to be selfish, and when they stop think about it, they're like, yeah, I'll be selfish.
Right.
So they're kind of selfish either way, whereas the trusting people are intuitively cooperative and deliberatively selfish.
Really interesting. So have you done the study where there's 12 cookies and 12 people, and Christie controls them and Hillary controls them, and Christie eats all 12 and Hillary gives one to everybody else? Have you done that yet?
That one's still in the docket.
That you're waiting for 2016 to release that?
Yeah, right, exactly. Got to see who wins.
Dr. Rand, thanks for being with us. And I'm really fascinated by these economic games that you do in the lab. Can you just briefly, before we go, describe another experiment that you've done in the lab which could raise some eyebrows or maybe reinforce our view of human behavior?
Sure. So another experiment, but another one of these economic games that's a very popular one, it's called the Ultimatum game, and it's a bargaining game. And so the way that it works is there's two people, and say there's $10, and the first person gets to propose a split. Say, I keep 7 and you get 3. And then you, as a responder, you get to either accept that offer, in which case we each get paid accordingly, or you can reject it, in which case neither of us get anything, and we both go home empty-handed.
Oh, okay.
And so applying these same kind of manipulations where you put people under time pressure, the interesting thing in the ultimatum game is what you do when you're the responder. So say somebody just gave you an unfair offer. They were going to keep 8 and they're going to give you 2. Do you accept that or not? And what a bunch of different researchers have shown is that when you put people under time pressure, it makes them more likely to reject the offer.
I see. Okay.
The intuition is to reject, and then what they stop. If you make people cool down and stop and think about it, they're like, well, whatever, $2 better than nothing. I'll take it. But the first impulse is to say, heck no, like I'm not gonna go for that. And so you might think that this is in some sense not consistent with our intuitive heroes thing.
Right. Is what I'm thinking.
Rejecting kind of seems like a nasty thing, right? But it actually makes a lot of sense because what we are saying is what's intuitive is the thing that works well in the context of real life and sort of ongoing relationships. And so in the terms of cooperation, if you don't know anything about the other person, or if the other person has cooperated with you in an ongoing relationship, it makes sense to cooperate with them back. But if the other person has just done something bad to you, has just sort of given you, has tried to take advantage of you, then it makes sense that you should respond by punishing them, essentially, so that the next time they'll give you a fair offer.
Right. Very interesting. I would love to see Congress go to the Human Cooperation Laboratory. That would be, that's an HBO event right there. You just got to.
Yeah, all right, well, we're ready. Send them down.
And the results could be binding on the country. I love it. Dr. David Rand with us, Assistant Professor of Psychology, Economics, and Management at Yale University, Director of Yale's Human Cooperation Laboratory, with some insight into why people who are heroes intuitively respond to act to save people, other people. Very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Rand.